What is up, my friends? My friends, what is happening? Welcome to today's SitRep, the situation report, where we go through news stories. Although today we're not going through news stories, and we pick them apart from the perspective of prepping to try and make sure that we are best prepared for whatever is coming our way. I hope you are having a fantastic Saturday, the 3rd of December. Yeah, we're in December. 2022, just rushing on by. No pun intended. Although, speaking of Russians, we're going to go check in with Tim in Kyiv. Not physically. I'm not calling him up or anything. Although that's something that he does quite a bit now. I've noticed in a lot of his threads, he's having interviews with all these like big mainstream media sources. No, I'm just getting sent his Twitter thread from one of my sources, and I go through it and read it and go, that bit's interesting, that bit's not interesting. So I try and read out those interesting bits, or the bits that I find interesting, because I think there's a lot to be learned from what this guy's experience is and what's happening on the ground there, because it's quite interesting. Peter Rouse says Elon is about to drop the hammer on Biden. So for those who don't know what that's about, Elon came out on Twitter and said, hey, all that stuff that Twitter had apparently suppressed about Hunter Biden's laptop, Elon's about to drop it. He's I've got it, the scoop. I'm going to drop it. I know. We'll see what happens. Is this Elon just being Elon and gaming the system and, creating attention, which I think he does a lot nowadays? I would actually argue that, you could say that Elon's main business now is creating attention to him, which obviously turns into money somehow. He figures that shit out. But yeah, we'll see what comes out of it anyway. But that's not what today's about. You will not distract me from what I'm going to talk about today. We're checking in with Tymofiy Milovanov from our professor from the Kyiv School of Economics, who has been battling his way through rolling blackouts for the last week in Kyiv. And so seeing what he's up to. So please sit back, put your feet up, and we'll go through some of these stories and have a think about it. By the way, feel free to interact with this. If there's anything that I'm talking about here in any of these stories and you think, oh, I've got an experience of this, or I think I know better than what's going on here, then feel free to chuck that in too. But the most interesting thing that I find about this is that Tim here is not a prepper in any way, shape, or form. And that's very obvious by how he got caught off guard right at the start, like the simple things. But it's his stream of consciousness of going through these things and going, oh, now I have to deal with this. Oh, wait, that's causing this problem. Oh, now I have to do this. So I find it very fascinating from the perspective of prepping that we can look at that and go like, that's really interesting. See how he didn't think about this. How, there are things in there that I hadn't thought about. I'm like, oh, wow, that's a really good lesson learned. So I can help prepare myself if I was in this sort of situation, which is it's cold, blackout, like I said, for about a week now, on and off. Water's been scarce and hard to get to. Food has been there, but on and off. And also the interesting dichotomy or juxtaposition, I should say, of what's actually happening with, we're dealing with these harsh conditions. Plus, I can still go to a restaurant and order a martini. How do those two fit in a world? All right, let's jump into it. We're at day 279 of the war, which I think is day 6 or 7 of this current blackout situation. So for those who don't know, the Russians targeted quite a lot of the energy infrastructure within Ukraine. And so that's what's caused these power issues within there. Peter Rouse, just back on this Elon thing, says Twitter's about to release it in a few minutes. Peter, if you want to, and if you can, keep your finger on the pulse there and type in any information that you're seeing that's coming in there, because we might have to cut our normal scheduled broadcast for some breaking news. All right, back on to Tim. Good evening. Day 279. It has been a week since the last Russian attack in Kyiv, and thus another one is coming soon. He's actually said this the last few days. He believes another one is coming. So far, it hasn't really presented itself, but we'll see what happens. We must prepare. I am president of the KSE, which is the Kyiv School of Economics, and this is what we have done to be ready. Water. After the last attack, there was no water for 30 to 4 hours. Toilets get clogged. So this is really where it all started. The most interesting thing that I saw on the first post that got sent to me was his issue around toilets and water. And they were like, oh shit, we don't have water. We don't have power. So we can't pump the water up to our apartment, which means we can either drink the water that we have or flush the toilet with the water we have. We can't really do both. So it creates this interesting conundrum. And it's one of those kind of, I would call it soft prepping things, or not quite blind side of prepping, but it is definitely dark. Like, a lot of people don't think about hygiene. A lot of people don't think about defecating and urinating in an emergency. It's something that I think about because I go camping a lot, but also from my time in the military, spending time in places like Afghanistan for months at a time, where we had to set up these systems, and we had things like a pissophone, which was essentially just a tube stuck into the earth, and guys would walk up. So you dig a hole, stick a tube in there, and then bury it in around there, and guys would go in there and piss into that pisser tube. It would fucking stink. You could imagine like a whole bunch of dudes like pissing in it, 2, 3, 4 times a day, times 60 men. It gets pretty freaking smelly. It gets really, really smelly. So if you're just sort of thinking like, oh yeah, in an emergency I'll be fine, like I'll just shit in the backyard or something like that, like really reconsider that. So this is one of the things, these toilets, this toilet issue linked with the water issue in Kyiv, that I really recommend to people to think about, put some thought into it. I've got a couple of different systems that I would use. In a pinch, I've got like a camping toilet, one of those chemical camping, like little square ones that doesn't weigh very much. You can get little tablets or chemical stuff that you can put in there that helps break down whatever it is, and then you can slide the actual fecal matter out, and it's contained within its own little thing, and take that somewhere else and dump it. So that's a system you might want to think about. Or bags and sawdust sort of system. Lime is another thing you want to think about. And then, of course, actually building other systems like compostable loos and things like that. Definitely something you want to think about. Today at KSE, we installed bio toilets. So he's talking about just that. It took them a week, but they got there with this, that they're going to have to do something about their waste products. And this is what they got to. They're installing bio toilets. I'm not 100% sure what he means by bio toilets, but I'm thinking it's possibly something that I just described there. We also put 500-litre tanks for flushing at each restroom. And it says that, as an aside, we have enough drinking water stored, which is a separate thing. So 500 litres just for flushing toilets and for washing hands and things like that, which is a good idea. Still, I would say that's pretty minimal amount in reality. If you want to actually flush toilets, then you probably, and depending on how many people are using them, 500 litres would be on the light side, I would say. Heating. Our university building has its own heating system. It runs on gas, but needs electricity to start up. That was a real interesting one for me. I was like, yeah, like, well, there's so many systems out there at the moment that are kind of multi sort of systems. Like, think of a modern barbecue for an Aussie. You kind of like turn, it's got the clicker. So that's electricity and gas being utilized there. What other systems, especially like old school heating systems, water heaters, require that? They need the gas, they need electricity to ignite, or they need the flame going. Remember when I was a kid back in the 80s, if we had no hot water, chances are that somehow the pilot light had gone out, and you'd have to go and sort that out. Me being the younger of the family, out you go and sort that pilot light out. But this is something you need to think about. today, modern safety sort of stuff, I don't think people dig having a open flame constantly sitting there burning in a gas system. That tends to freak people out. So I don't think we have that anymore. We've got electric ignition for a lot of heating systems. And that's what he's found out here, that they've got gas, but they don't have electricity, so they don't have heat. The macro view of this is thinking about what systems, what inputs there are into your systems that you utilize. This can be a hard one. This, for me, is really where the green revolution breaks down a little bit. When you really start to nut into and think about the inputs required into a system. And I say this all the time when I start talking about the green, technologies and stuff like that we're using. That I'm not against them. I'm actually a massive fan, and I support people using it. I use it myself. I have solar panel setups and things like that. This is something that you should invest in, I believe. But the thing is, you also got to understand what inputs it takes and what happens if things break down, and how it all gets put together. So it's not just what I think a lot of people assume nowadays, this magical sort of thing. People, just don't think about what it takes for something to happen. I just step into my car and I press a button and it goes. You don't think about all the little things that actually happen in order for that simple button push to start an internal combustion engine and for you to actually drive, as an example. So it's thinking about this, going like, yep, I've got gas. I hear this sort of stuff from people all the time when I'm talking about prepping. Oh, no, I've got heaps of this, so I'm fine. I'm like, all right, cool. Have you also thought about this? Why would I need to think about like this? Great example. I've got heaps of gas, I'm fine. Cool. How do you ignite the gas? What do you mean? Well, is it electric ignition? So if the power's out, would it work? Oh, I don't know. I guess I'd just use a big lighter or something like it. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Renee C says, fun crawling under the house to check the pilot light. Yep, that was always fun times. So here's another interesting thing about electricity here. Several weeks ago, we installed a 13 kilowatt generator. That's interesting because I've actually got a 13 kilowatt generator here. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Now, this is for a university, though, for university purposes. So they're trying to run a university. They're trying to continue it on. They're trying to run things like lights, computers, heating, food type things. So food heating devices. What else were they running? Coffee machines and such what, off a 13 kilowatt generator, which you might look at that and go like, that's plenty power. And for an individual, even a household, that might be plenty of power or enough power. But we've got multiple human beings here. We've got dozens, maybe, I don't know, hundreds of people. I don't know how many people are in this university set up here. But when you start to get to that sort of level, something like a 13 kilowatt generator is not going to cut the mustard. And that's what they've found out. This last attack proved it is not enough. We searched for more powerful generators, but there are none in the market in Ukraine. We even asked high-ranked government officials to help. They came up short. There were no generators in Poland. Finally, we got an offer from Turkey. We said today and now English is obviously not his first language, but we've now got a 100 kilowatt generator en route. So you can see the difference there of what they're talking about. 13 kilowatts, and they're like, that's not enough. 100 kilowatts. If you're generating power for multiple people, for a group, for a community type setup, you're going to have to go large scale. 100 kilowatt generator as a minimum, I would say, for this sort of setup. Apparently it's going to be in Kyiv in a week. That's pretty cool. Food. He hasn't talked a lot about food, but this one was interesting. We ordered 180 portions of fast camping food. Another 180 is coming tomorrow. This is, there's got a photo of it. Peter Rouse says we'll need 10 of those generators, as in talking about 13 kilowatt generators. So yeah, camping food. This is actually something I've got. I don't normally recommend people rush out and buy long-term storage food until you've got your other food systems sorted. So first and foremost, you should look at what your pantry has and fill that. Make sure that there's plenty of that. So then you're using what you eat and eating what you actually store. After that, start to look at then longer term versions of that. After that, start looking at what I call emergency food, so freeze dried food, camping food, things like that. And I certainly have this for my family. I've got one of those big sealed barrels that I've just filled with little camping meals. But 180 meals, again, 180, packet meals in a pinch, right? Let's say if you're going to try and maintain some semblance of normalcy, some semblance of keeping your calories up, especially in an emergency situation when you are going to be burning calories more than you are right now, then you should be trying to eat 3 meals a day, 2 to 3 meals a day. But let's say they stick at 3 meals a day, then what does 180 become? That's 60 all of a sudden, because we're going through, that's 60 days worth of food for a human being because you're eating 3 a day. But it's not just for a human being, it's for a university. How many people are there? So let's say there's 60 people there. That's 1 day's worth of food. So you really got to think about this. The math starts to get a bit boggling. And at some point, when you get too many people, these sort of meals don't stack up. They're not financially viable, I would say, either. So again, a lot of people want to do that when they're thinking about prepping and going, oh yeah, I'll just go buy a whole heap of these freeze-dried meals or dehydrated meals from company X, and that'll do me. That like I'll be fine in an emergency. And I just say, well, just pump the brakes and reconsider. Like there's probably a better way you could do that. There's a more cost-effective way you can do it, and there's probably a better way where you're going to be eating things that you regularly eat anyway, because most people don't regularly eat camping meals like every day. Here's some here actually. Just happen to have some sitting on my shelf that I've been meaning to try. These ones are actually, I bought them in Sweden, but I think they might be from Norway. Real Termat. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about, right? Where it's all freeze-dried, it's lightweight. They go really well on a pack, and if you're hiking and camping and stuff like that. But, I don't regularly pull these out and eat them. I do it every now and then just to test them out. But I'm not regularly eating that stuff. So it is really an emergency food because it's not going to be good for you. Well, at least not for me, in my experience, when I was in the military and we're eating these sorts of things for weeks and weeks on end. It does some pretty interesting stuff to your guts, and they're not good things. They're not great things. So that's something you need to think about. Talks about internet here. They've got 2 providers. They've set up a Starlink, talking about where to set it up. Obviously, it needs to be on a roof. I'm not sure why that was a surprise to him. This often does come as a surprise to people, actually, and it surprises me that it surprises people. When we're talking about satellite-type communication, so Starlink uses satellites, a satellite dish that communicates to satellites, sat phones, satellite GPSs, anything that requires satellite connection. It needs to see satellites, as in it needs some sort of view of the sky. I don't know why that's some kind of revelation to people. That should be as obvious as it can get, that in order to talk to a satellite, you need to actually have view of a satellite. You don't need to see the satellite, but if you're in a bunker, that's not going to work. If you're indoors, it's probably not going to work. If you're setting up a Starlink indoors or on a balcony or something, it's probably not going to work, or at least it's not going to work as well. Because if you're on a balcony, which means you're next to a building, then all that there of the sky cannot be seen by the satellite, which means you're cutting out a whole chunk of your sky. So you need to get these things up high. This was an interesting one, and he didn't really explain it, so I'd really love to know what's going on here. We plan to drill holes in the ground to have a direct access to a source of water. So you're in a city and you're drilling holes in the ground to what? I was really confused about this. If anyone knows if there's something I'm missing here, Kyiv has water flowing underneath it that you can just drill into the ground and it'll pop up, or you can access the pipes or something like that. but it kind of confused me. Does he actually believe he can just drill a hole in the ground and water pops up? I don't get it. I don't get what he's saying here. So yeah, if somebody could explain that, or maybe there'll be a revelation in a couple of days when he does this and goes like, "Oh, we dug a hole and no water came up," surprisingly, or water did come up, and then I'll be surprised. We also want to install a septic tank. This is a good idea. This is another option that you can think about for waste products. Then they'll be set for the key functions: water, toilets, electricity, heating, food. We still have to take care of sleeping options, but this is for the day. It goes on to talk about some other stuff about working in darkness, talk about being at restaurants. So he goes to this restaurant. Bars are open apparently in Kyiv. Again, like we're seeing the juxtaposition between like struggling to deal with waste products and find water sources and going out for a beer at night. Like, this is the thing about emergency situations that like it is actually quite common in my experience, at least, that you'll find this sort of stuff. This one I found interesting. He's talked about this in the past, but he kind of puts out here a simple life hack: just power up your Christmas lights using batteries to get light when there is no electricity. So those Christmas lights, especially the newer ones, working on LEDs, which you can get ones that take very low power draw. So you could theoretically utilize even smaller batteries to power these, but like a battery pack or something like that, or a 12 volt certainly would work. You can light these Christmas lights and they'll light up an area, and they light it up actually quite well, quite efficiently. And I know this because I do it right now. I've only got one power point in a certain point in one of the rooms in my house, and I just hung up some Christmas lights recently because it's December. But it meant I had to unplug the lamp that was there. That was like the main source of light for that room. So now when I want light, I've got to turn the Christmas lights on and just put them on a setting where they're just on, and it actually provides a really nice atmosphere, but plenty of light for me to sit there and read or do anything that I need to. So little hack for people, thinking outside of the box here too, which is what I like to see. They're innovating and finding new ideas, new solutions to their problems. What else is he talking about? Kyiv has slowly come back to life after the attack last week. Similar to us, the entire city has been preparing for the next one. I feel we are ready, and the life will test us. So that I just wanted to leave, like, that's the last post for that day, where he's really starting to point out that things are returning to normal, but now people have learned from their mistakes. Similar, I think, to what has happened here in Australia, where we went through those horrific bushfires a couple of years ago, and people were like acutely aware of bushfire after that. People were so aware of it, so people were really on the ball and going like, okay, what do we need to do? Like, for example, I was designing a house at the time, or have been over the past couple of years. So really thinking about that now that I'm going to build a house, I'm like, well, actually, these are the things that I need to think about. These are the things that I saw work, and these are the things that don't. So it's that learning, unfortunately, from a shitty place, being that it's that you had to go through the bad thing first in order to get the information, in order to then learn how to prepare. But these guys look like they are preparing and learning from it. All right, let's jump into the next day, I think. Where are we? Yeah, here we are, I think. Good morning from day 281. So I've skipped a couple of days here. There's a few days where he's talking about stuff that doesn't really pertain too much. Well, I didn't pull anything from it, really. It's interesting if you want to know about his life, but you should just jump on his thread anyway. It's Tymofiy Milovanov. I will try and post that up at some stage, a link to it. There's not been an attack in Kyiv for 8 days. We now get electricity several times a day for several hours. It feels luxurious. Imagine now, as an Australian or a New Zealander, that you only got electricity a couple of times a day for a couple of hours each, it would probably not feel luxurious. But in comparison to what he's been through, it does feel really, really good. So yeah, you can start to see like their mindset, where they're at, how they've changed already. He goes on to talk. I'm not really going to go into this one too much, but this whole thread was about basically the Ukrainian Railway. So the Ukrainian Railway, I didn't understand this, because he starts off talking about how much of an inspiration they are to him and how great they've been. I didn't really realize what they've been up to, but this illustrates it, which is quite interesting, because you've got railway stations, which are hubs for human beings to come into. You've got underground stations, which are also protective, and apparently during the shelling, they were actually calling people in there. UR has not stopped working for an hour during the war. They evacuated millions of people under shelling. They kept trains on time and opened new connections, and turned train stations into centers of life that serve as places where people can shelter, shop, meet, eat, get medical help, and of course, travel. So they've kind of, pivoted very, very quickly here from just being a public transport hub to being a hub for people to come into and actually connect, probably get warm, get some food if they need it. They can do some shopping there, all in a relatively safe, protected space, which is really awesome to see. And I must admit that I've seen this quite a few times in certain emergencies. One that pops into my mind straight away is when I traveled up to the Northern Rivers after their floods up there, those horrific floods that they had recently. And the little community centers that on a dime very quickly outfitted themselves, and they had people who were organizing rescue efforts, people who were organizing where assets go, and resources for people, little hubs where people go into, where donations were being moved into and sorted, where you could go in if you'd lost a lot of stuff and go, hey, I need blankets, I need food, and people were like, yep, no worries, we'll look after you. So very quickly doing that. And then other places, like I worked out of, during that particular one, I worked out of a hangar in an airport, one of the airports up there. It's an old sort of disused hangar, and they were doing helicopter missions out, and then they had a whole bunch of us with utes and stuff like that, getting out to people who, you couldn't get out to, or they couldn't get out from where they were. So places that required four-wheel drive vehicles to get into. So a lot of resources would go in there, a lot of donations would go in there and then go back out. But it's just interesting to think about that. Again, these sorts of things, I think, illustrate to us a couple of things. Firstly, the resiliency of a human being, of generally of human beings, and how we can adapt to crisis quite well. A lot of people think that a crisis happens and we're all going to go friggin' Mad Max all of a sudden. Well, that generally doesn't happen. It's going to have to be a pretty big crisis for us to go to those sort of lengths. People generally want to do the right thing. People generally want to look after each other. But it also, for me, I start to look at that and go, okay, now, where would that happen in my community? I know where it would happen in my community because it's happened, because we've had floods, we've had fires. So I've seen it happen here. But this is something that's worthwhile thinking, and something I want to illustrate to people, or just put out there, is like, start to think about this. Start to think where your hub might be. Start to think about who would be the people who would step up into that hub. Even start to think about, would it be you who would do that? Would you be one of the organizers? Because quite often what I see time and time again in emergency situations, especially natural disaster situations, it's not, certainly in Australia, it's not the government that comes running in some sort of like government polo shirt and government hat and says, I'm the government and I'm here to help. It's the individual human beings. It's whoever is there and whoever is capable and whoever is willing, most of all, to step up and be a leader. That's the person who's going to help other people. That is the person in an emergency who's going to be an asset. And that's what I would encourage you to think about doing if you were ever in an emergency situation. Obviously, look after yourself first, whatever you've got to do to get yourself to a good place so that you're solid, so that you're an asset, not a liability, but then actually be that asset. Inject yourself into these roles, step up into it. It's the people who, like, literally, it's just the people who stand up and say, well, I'm going to do this. And everyone just eyes glazed over and mouth agape, like, okay, do that. It's a vacuum of not of power, but of leadership. And so whoever steps up into it is going to take that role. So start thinking about that for your own personal safety, your own personal well-being, because no one else is going to do it. Again, I don't like the government comes in after, much after, and they just basically, in my experience at least of the Australian government, they come in after and throw money in people's faces and go, look at what we've done. Hang on, how far away are we from an election? We're close. Oh, more money. Look at all this good we've done here. In the actual time where it's happening, don't expect help. Do not expect it. If it comes, great, but don't expect it. Rely on yourself. Be a self-reliant human being. This is another little interesting thing from what he's calling the fortress. The Fortress of Resilience, which I love the title of it, which he's talking about these train stations that they've converted into these community hubs. Fortress of Resilience. There are wooden stoves in the hall, firewood, water supplies. They are ready for any kind of blackout. The fortress can shelter 500 to 1,000 people. They even have minibuses that can drive people home or go get supplies if needed. So this is a really well organized little setup they've got here. There are US aid supplied blankets. They've got thousands of them there, and the railways are serving as a distributor for these kind of things. So the railway has the ability to get out to places. So they're moving goods and donated stuff out there. There are even chemical heating pads for hands so people can get warm faster, especially kids. In the station, there are also a lot of shops operating 24/7. And he's got photos of the shops and videos of the shops, which, pretty cool. Lots of normal operating shops. Got water, fizzy water, juices, Red Bull, Sprite, all the stuff that you'd see on a normal supermarket. All they're doing there is going, here's a supermarket and it's open 24/7. So come get it. Yeah, so I mean, pretty good job there from the railway. I liked that story. That was a nice one. Oh, shit, I've just lost my story. There we go. Clicked the wrong button. So last one that I'm going to talk about today, because this will kind of take us up to date roughly with what's been happening. We're outside of Kyiv now. That was the interesting thing for me. He's like, okay, cool. I get what's happening in Kyiv because you've got a concentration of people who are very reliant on the system, and the system has broken down. Today, we drove from Kyiv to Vinnytsia, a regional center. He's in a hotel room. He says the quality of the hotel room is really awesome. Vinnytsia has not had their water system hit yet and is oblivious to the consequences. So it's quite interesting that he's just driven out of the city to somewhere else. And he's like, these people are oblivious to the problems that are going on. So there's no rush to stockpile water here. He's talking about interviews that he's done recently. The city is dark. There is no alternative. Yes, we are debating Russia's claim that they are bombing Nazis in Ukraine. He's just talking about the interview he did with CNN. This one was interesting because he touches on this a couple of times. But if you don't know this about me, I'm going to give you a little revelation. I like dogs. I really, really like dogs. In fact, given any sort of survival situation outside of my family and my close friends, I would almost be more likely to rescue a dog than I would another human. I know that might not tickle people the right way, but that's my truth. I just really, really like dogs. So he finds a dog, and he's actually got a little video of him patting the dog's belly here, which I like videos of dogs. But he writes this up right here. Dogs are friendly everywhere. In every village, on the way, and in the city. They run up to you and ask for attention and warmth. I think they're all traumatized even more than people. Poor animals. We should do more for animal shelters. That was the key point. We should do more for animal shelters. This is another thing when I went up to help out with the flood effort up in the Northern Rivers, and I was people were donating to me, and I was using a lot of my own cash and things like that just to buy up supplies so I could give to people. One of the things that I bought up was a whole heap of dog food when I was heading up there. So I had my ute tray was filled with stuff, and there was a good section of that was dedicated to animal welfare, so to dogs. And when I was up there too, like I was saying, I was out doing 4-wheel drive sort of missions where other people can get to. Quite often that was for dogs and horses that I was going out there and doing. So I was doing hay deliveries, I was doing feed deliveries, I was doing other animal product deliveries and stuff like that. And doing welfare checks on people who had animals and make sure that their animals are okay. Because the one thing I think a lot of people forget in these kind of hard situations, we get very human focused, but there's a lot of animals out there too that that do deserve, I think, our help as well. In the sense of prepping, this is another one of those dark spots. This is another one of those spots that I think people don't often think about, even when they're prepping. Yep, I prepped me. I'm fine. I'm like, cool. Do you have a family? Yeah. Cool. Do they all have go bags? Do they all prep? Have you got enough food for them? I will. Cool. Do you have dogs or cats if you're that way inclined? Pretty sure cats could sort themselves out though. Yeah, I do. Cool. Have you got supplies for them? If you have 30 days worth of food and water and shelter and electricity sorted out for you, do you have the same for your pets? I think this is a huge thing that people need to think about. And I would recommend that you do. Also, part of your plans as well. For me, it's like, yeah, I've got stored food, and then I've got longer term food, things like, am I going to hunt for food? What am I going to do? Hunting food, obviously, then I'm hunting food for me and my family. And when I say family, that includes my dogs. So that's really what I wanted to point out of that. There's a whole heap of other stuff in there, but really that was the big thing that jumped out at me. So I wanted to take that opportunity to have that little chat and just put the reminder out there that dogs are an essential part, or our pets are an essential part of our families, and for many reasons are extremely important in emergency situations. So we should really factor that in. I mean, my dog, like, first and foremost, it's a morale thing. I'll 100% admit I need that connection with my dog. I absolutely need that. But on top of that, there are other things that the dog provides. It's a German Shepherd. It should be pretty obvious what it provides. Security, being the foremost. It guards the house. It lets me know, what am I doing today? I am converting our current wort with me and my friend into distilling it to put on our first batch of whiskey. Self-reliant human being. Whiskey. It's part of my preps. Anyway, apart from that, I hope you're having a great Saturday. I hope things are going great wherever you are, whatever you're up to, and I hope your life is swimming along nicely. Keep the prepping up, guys. Keep the eyes open as always. Remember that the world is not ending. Things are still all right. We might be trending somewhere. Times might be getting tougher. We might be looking down the barrel of some tough times ahead, but right now we can still afford food. There is plenty of it out there. We still have the time and the space to do things like gardening, to set up our own system. So I really encourage you to do that. And think about your pets today too. Prep for your pets. All right, gang, that's it for today. As always, stay safe and Semper Paratus.